Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you getting on? So, have Bethesda given up on Fallout 76? And also a little bit of news about Ghostwire Tokyo and Starfield. So here's a little spoiler alert for you. I don't really think they've given up on it at all, to be honest. But yeah, let's get into this, shall we? Okay then, so yes, we've had a little bit of news coming out over the last weekend and a whole load of chatter on the socials and such, so there's a few things I wanted to address and talk about. First up, we're going to talk about Ghostwire Tokyo and Starfield, and then we'll jump into the Fallout stuff in a moment, as that's a little bit more wordy and time-consuming. So let's start with Ghostwire Tokyo. So for those who don't know, Ghostwire Tokyo is scheduled to come out in the first half of this year. It's scheduled for the spring, but that looks more like sometime in the next few months anyway. And it's, funnily enough, set in Tokyo. It's by Tango Gameworks, who are a Japanese developer, formerly of Capcom background, some of the stuff. And they are the group behind the Evil Within series. So this is going to be a spooky game set in Tokyo where all of the inhabitants of Tokyo have vanished and been replaced with all manner of spooky demons and monsters and stuff, which the player must face off against. So don't actually know too much about it, but it looks very, very cool. Got a very, very cool announcement a couple of years ago now at E3. But the update is that back before Christmas, we knew that it was scheduled for the spring, or at least the first half of this year. And on Friday, we found out that apparently it has now entered the certification phase, so it's getting age-rated in various markets. Particularly Korea is the one that's in the article, which I'll throw up on screen for you. But yeah, if it's getting certified, it means that various boards are taking a close look at a very nearly finished version of the game and deciding what age rating to apply to it. So must be on track is the conclusion now. Obviously, Bethesda haven't said anything overt, and we probably won't hear anything for a few weeks at least, but I would imagine a release date cannot be very far off on that at all if it's now being certified. So very good news there. Nice to know that's on track. Very interested in that. It's a little outside my usual wheelhouse, but it looks like a kind of action-style game that looks like it'd be good fun. It's very, very stylish from the look of things. So definitely down for trying that one out. So if you haven't already, subs and notification bell, and do watch out for streams, as I suspect I will be able to fit that quite nicely into the schedule. So yeah, do keep an eye out for that one. So, on to the next thing, which is Starfield. So, not masses of news coming out on this. There's been a little bit of chatter about what's going on and what stage it is in development and so on and so forth in the last couple of days. I know on Friday again, Skullsy put out a video, which should be somewhere on the screen about now, talking about the latest bits of information and so on and so forth. Basically, what Skullsy had to say was that they were probably working on the final lighting model, which is the last thing they do before going into ironing out the creases and bug fixing and all that. That's probably around and about right. Back before Christmas, we had Todd Howard saying that they had quite a lot to do before the final polishing, which apparently, so Skullsy says from a source that I'm not too sure about, but okay, that's the last stage of what Bethesda does, and the final lighting passes and stuff are part of that polishing phase. Sounds reasonable. So, Skullsy's stuff obviously is usually pretty solidly researched, and it does look like that's roughly where they are, but that will be quite quick given what Todd Howard said before. So, I guess what I'm saying here, if anything, is there's probably not much changed in what we know about where Starfield is, and maybe don't get too excited and read too much into things. Skullsy also cited a job listing that was up on the internet and went up just before Christmas, so about 4 weeks ago now, asking for a cinematic lighting professional of some kind. And he was inferring some interesting things from that. The idea that they're going to be more cinematics, that seems reasonable. If you look at, say, Mass Effect, for example, when you transition from space to a planet, there's a cinematic, and that's in all likelihood, probably the way that Bethesda will go with Starfield. It could also mean that they want the lighting design overall to have a cinematic feel. If we go back to last June and have a look at the trailer they put out, that's an in-game trailer. It was recorded in-game using in-game footage, etc, etc, etc. Obviously, Bethesda will have ramped the settings up to 11 for it, of course. Obviously, it's marketing material, why wouldn't they? But there's definitely a cinematic vibe to it. Again, it's a trailer, so cinematic vibe's kind of what you'd expect. But it's not a stretch from that to infer that the style of lighting they might be going for in the game is a cinematic one. So that's also a thing that is a possibility that Scorsese didn't touch on, or at least if he did, I missed it. So, as a little thought. On the other hand, again, I wouldn't read too much in terms of where they are in progress on that. That particular job advert came out right before Christmas. Then you had the whole Christmas break, which Bethesda closed down for, incidentally, and they've said they do this, which is fair. They want to take Christmas holiday, same as the rest of us. That seems reasonable. So Bethesda will have shut down for a significant portion of this 3-4 weeks that the job listing was up for. And job listings in general, from posting a job listing to actually employing somebody, it's not something that happens overnight. Usually, there's a bit of time and work and stuff involved. So, as to whether or not this hire has happened and whether or not they're actually in working yet, I'd imagine they'll probably be looking to arrive in the next month or so, as opposed to being in there already. So, I mean, they might want to drop somebody into an existing ongoing process, which is fine, in which case the whole final lighting passes and stuff may be underway. Or they might be planning ahead of that so that they can come in and start at the beginning. So it may not be underway yet, which would also be consistent with Todd Howard's indicating that this phase was still a little way off back before Christmas. Although that was end of November, start of December that particular observation was made. So times might have changed. They might have had a smooth run through the last few weeks and made more progress than expected. Who knows? But yeah. Essentially what I'm saying is don't read too much into it. It looks like everything continues to be on track. Nothing actually official from Bethesda on this front, really. So maybe not reading too much into it, but it sounds like things are chugging on at a reasonable rate and about the pace we would expect. So that's the update on Starfield. Obviously, when we get more news on that, I will, of course, be bringing it. Looking forward to seeing the next in the video series that Bethesda are doing, so we'll have stuff to talk about there. Possibly even some new concept art to have a look at as well. Maybe even a tiny little bit of footage, who knows. But, yeah, excited for that. So, last but not least, Fallout. So, Fallout 76. There's a lot of chatter online at the moment about whether or not Bethesda are giving up on the game, whether or not they're going to let it wind down and stuff like that. And as I said before, I don't really think that's the way they're going. This sort of conversation has been around in one form or another since shortly after launch. So, you know, it's kind of nothing new in a lot of ways. But I do have a number of reasons why I think they're probably just continuing as normal with the game. And I'll be the first to say that I really, really want to see Bethesda ramp up the amount of content they're putting in the game. The biggest complaint I have really right now is that there's not enough new stuff to do, which I'm sure a lot of you can empathise with. And I would certainly like to see that. On the other hand, we also know, small team, stuff takes time to produce, yada, yada, yada. It is what it is. So, why do I not think that they're giving up on it? Well, largely because what they're doing at the moment is more or less consistent with what they've been doing the whole lifespan of the game so far. If we look back over the last few years, we go back to, say, just before Wastelanders. In the run-up to Wastelanders, there was a period of roughly 9 months or so where they put out very, very little. It was a dark, dark time. The amount of new content, stuff going on, was minimal while they worked hell for leather on Wastelanders, which obviously biggest update they've ever done. And when that came out, things picked up again afterwards, and there we go. Before that, and again afterwards, the amount of stuff that was coming out and the way it was going and the large content points compared to the smaller ones and the frequency that were coming out with is fairly similar to what has been happening now and in the last year or so. So if we look at the last year, specifically, I mean December 2020 to December 2021, so ignore the last couple of weeks because Christmas, yada, yada, yada. So for that period, i.e. the last full year, we had 2 Brotherhood of Steel updates, or the 2 halves of it. Obviously, December and then July. We had the Locked and Loaded update, which brought a lot of features. And we had Fallout Worlds and Night of the Moth, and a few little tiny bits and pieces around that as well. So, obviously, the Brotherhood of Steel stuff will be sizable. They've got to create new characters, overhaul locations, add new locations, backstories, get voice actors in, yada yada yada, design all the quests, write all the dialogue, and then do all the work of building it into a game with a relatively small team again. So that takes time, and the reason it's spread out and slow is that. And I personally think they're probably working on towards the next thing now. Obviously, we've got Expeditions coming up next year, and I suspect the next story content is also underway. I mean, Bethesda haven't said anything, and I would love to see better communication on what they're working on that front. Like, just a little bit more information. Even if you look at Expeditions, for example, we haven't heard anything since last summer. I'd really like to have heard, yeah, we're working on it, it's coming along, maybe a couple of screenshots here and there. Even that would be nice, just to, keep us a little bit aware of what's going on. But it is what it is, it's not the way it goes. The drawback to that is if they talk about features that then end up getting cut, people will get upset about it. Understandably, but development involves some things not working and other things coming in and yada yada yada, so it is often best to keep quiet on that sort of stuff. But a few little tidbits of information here and there would be nice, just so we know things are going along. But either way, much like with the run-up to Wastelanders or with other large content beats, expeditions are going to be a big thing that take us outside of the map. That's going to require designing entirely new maps and zones, building them from the ground upwards, more or less, and putting new characters in there, new enemies, a means of getting there, stories to go with it, dialogue, etc, 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 everything else that goes in, and probably countless things that I can't even think of because I'm not a game developer. So it's a fairly hefty project. Once it's in place, they'll have, I suspect, if I know the way Bethesda work on 76, a framework that they can then use as a kind of template to start building subsequent expeditions with. But for now, they've got to lay the groundwork first, foundations first before you put the roof on. And add to that the way the last set of updates came out throughout that last year. Let's say you got about 6-7 months between major updates, with slightly smaller but significant ones in between. So Locked and Loaded was March. That brought a lot of features. There were a lot of new features came alongside Steel Rain as well. Fallout Worlds in September might not have landed spectacularly with the player base, but it worked okay for what it was. And it will have been a fairly sizable undertaking in and of itself as well, to design these worlds, to put the infrastructure in place to have people design their own and set their own stuff up, and so on and so forth. So that is not a small update, even if it hasn't gained a great deal of traction. Basically, they are still putting content out. And again, if you go all the way back to the first year or so, where you're looking at Wild Wasteland and the whole sheep squash stuff and the Wasted on Xion and all of that, if you go in old school, there were similar things going on. The big thing at the time was the run-up to Nuclear Winter, and obviously that launched. But there were other smaller bits of content that are comparable to the smaller bits of content that have been coming out in the last year, in that phase as well. And then, of course, there were things that were delayed and things that were pulled as well, which is also happening now. So, in a nutshell, what's happening at the moment and in the last year or so is pretty consistent with what has been going on right through the game's lifespan. So, nothing has really changed that makes me think they're giving up on it. One of the other things that people have been talking about is whether or not they'll sort of let it wind down towards the release of Starfield, which I don't think makes a whole lot of sense. They don't need the staff. Obviously, if they needed the staff, they'd need them during the development phase, not after the game has come out. Starfield obviously is just about the biggest single project that Bethesda have had in 20-something years. There's Elder Scrolls 6 coming after Starfield, which obviously will start development once Starfield releases. But if they've been able to do Starfield without taking the devs off 76, or not too much anyway, then they'll definitely be able to do the same for the next Elder Scrolls game, because unlike Starfield, they won't have to overhaul the engine in the same way. They won't have to build an entire universe from the ground up, or almost from the ground up anyway. The world of the Elder Scrolls is already in place. The lore, the setting, the rules of the universe, as it were, they're already there for that. So they won't need to pull devs in the same way that they might have done for Starfield for that next project. So I really don't think that Starfield is going to have any impact on 76 at all. There's no real reason for it to do. Most of the current team working on 76 will not have been doing a great deal of Starfield stuff. They'll have had their fingers in there on occasion, because that's the way Bethesda work. But for the most part, they'll have been busy doing their own thing with 76. So I don't think Starfield's release is going to have any kind of impact at all. And as I say, you don't need more devs after the game is released. You need them before the game is released, if you need them at all. So that's basically why I think 76 is not going to be wound down in that point in time either. So the other thing, of course, which is secondary and kind of a new bit of news as well from the last week or so, is that the Fallout TV series we've had announced was shouted out on Twitter, or an article about it was shared on Twitter by the Fallout official channel. That TV series is going into production this year, which is very, very cool news. That basically means they're going to be filming it. Rumour has it the casting is underway at the moment. don't know too much about that. I haven't seen reliable sources for it. Maybe others have, but I haven't. In either case, it seems to be true that they are going to be starting the filming process of that series this year, which is very, very cool. They haven't specified when in the year, so I've seen a few people talking about that, meaning, oh, we'll have the series out and we'll be able to watch it by the beginning of next year. That's optimistic, I think, would be a good word. The filming, we don't know when that's going to start other than this year. That's a 12-month period. It could be anywhere, and it could start in December and it'd still be this year. It'll probably start before then, I think. My hunch will be they'll aim to film it over the summer. But based on that, if you look at things like, say, The Witcher and other series that are in a similar bracket to the Fallout one will be, both on Netflix and on Amazon, which is where Fallout's going to be, then it's taking them at least 18 months to go from the start of principal photography to release. Varies with series, but it's at least that long. So I think the earliest we can possibly expect it is the second half of next year, maybe the end of next year. So don't get your hopes up on it being next January. I'm thinking probably in the run-up to Christmas of 2023. So still a long wait. And that'll be an amazing time for Fallout 76 to do some stuff to tie into it, which, assuming the game is still going then, I think it probably will be. It's another reason I think it's less likely that they'll wind down Fallout 76. It's a very, very tenuous thing, but it's also cool that they're making the series, so there's my theory. I don't think very much has changed in terms of the way they're putting content out. It has its ups and its downs. It's a bumpy ride, as it always has been. There are periods where there's not much going on. There's periods where there's a sudden burst of activity, and so on. And what's happened in the last year or so is consistent with that, as it has been through the whole lifespan of the game. So, as I say, don't read too much into it. Just, I think we're going to hear more in coming weeks about things like expeditions and start to hear rumblings about what's going on further on in the year. It's usually about March they put the year's roadmap out, so unless we get bugger all in March, excuse my language, but that's when I would start to worry at the earliest. Until then, it's business as usual, I think. So I'm now going round in circles, so I'll wrap that one there. Anyway, I hope you guys found this snippet of news interesting and had some interesting thoughts in there. I'm sure there's plenty of people who disagree with my perspective, but they're quite entitled to do that. I'm probably not going to change my mind. I'm certainly looking forward to Ghostwire Tokyo. Definitely going to play that when it releases, hopefully in the next few months. We'll probably hear about it before too much longer, I think. And of course, Starfield come the end of the year will be awesome. Sci-fi plus Bethesda. Especially with it being grounded in sort of real-world technology and recognizable technologies, that's really my thing. I'm very much down for that. I'm hyped for that. So, loads of cool stuff coming. Starting a new series that we are streaming this week. That should be kicking off on Tuesday, so do watch this space for that one. Looking forward to that. And, of course, we'll be playing Fallout 76 as well. And I need to look into getting some other stuff happening as well, so that should be fun. In any case, thank you very much for watching. If you did like the video, if you are looking forward to some of this cool new stuff that is coming up, please do drop subs and likes and hit that notification bell. I do very, very much appreciate it. Do join the live streams as well, as I say. There's cool stuff coming up there. Down below the video, social media links, the merch store, if you want to check those out. A couple of new products on the merch store. Very much appreciate the support in that direction. And channel memberships, which I've also recently updated as well. If you're interested, you can have a look at that little blue join button. Do check that one out as well. I massively appreciate the support there as well. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.